Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on BloombergQuint Live, India's first digital live streaming business news service. I am Agam Vakil. Let's start by taking a look at the headlines. Hemant Soren is set to become the next Chief Minister of Jharkhand after the JMM-Congress alliance secures a majority in the 81-member assembly. Lenders to Jet Airways decide to seek fresh bids for the grounded carrier after the sole bidder seeks more time on deciding to invest. The RBI conducts its own version of Operation Twist on Monday, buys long-term bonds worth 10,000 crore rupees while simultaneously selling short-term securities worth 6,800 crore rupees. And Reliance Jio announces a 2020 Happy New Year offer where smartphone users can avail unlimited services for 1 year for 2020 rupees. And Dennis Muilenburg has been sacked as the CEO of Boeing after a tumultuous year. Chairman David Calhoun is the next president and CEO. The U.S. stock markets began the holiday-shortened week on a positive note, with the benchmark indices posting a record-closing high, with the Nasdaq logging its longest record-closing streak since 1998. And the Dow Jones outperformed its peers, aided by a rise in Boeing shares. Renita Young of Bloomberg News wraps up Monday's Wall Street action in this report.
U.S. markets closed out Monday's session at record highs yet again against the backdrop of U.S.-China trade relations. The most recent action came from China as it eased some of its tariffs, giving some U.S. markets room to breathe. Now, during the session, we saw Boeing rise after ousting its CEO. We saw Apache rising as its deal with Total boost hopes of developing an oil tract near Suriname. And we saw Seadrill jumping after its multiple oil rig contract hints at an improving market. Meanwhile, the U.S. dollar was a little bit higher, yet we still saw some trade angst, so it's no surprise that investors sought a safe haven in gold, and we saw it tick up about 0.5%. And there was still some mixed economic data that came out. Although we saw new U.S. home sales increasing in November, we saw durable goods unexpectedly fall. And that's a look at your Monday Wall Street action. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
Let's take a look at the Asian markets now. We have Sophie Kamaruddin, who's standing by from the Bloomberg studios in Hong Kong. Sophie, good morning.
Well, good morning. It is a muted session on Christmas Eve. Folks look ready to get into those holidays as we're seeing the regional benchmark in Asia resume declines for a fourth session in 5. The yen just treading water, trading at 109.40 thereabouts, pretty much where it was at the start of 2019. And bonds holding steady as well. We have 10-year treasuries just keeping above 1.9%. And when it comes to the equity space, you have the Kospi leading declines off about 0.2%, with Samsung the biggest drag, while the outlier is very much New Zealand stocks, the NZX 50 climbing to a fresh high. Now, here in Hong Kong, we are seeing the Hang Seng just move lower by 0.1%, while we're seeing Chinese stocks trading higher on the mainland. The CSI 300 gaining 0.3%. Perhaps some boost coming through on Chinese Premier Li Keqiang's vow to see the triple R cuts come through in order to support the economy. Also want to highlight what's going on with Aussie shares. We are seeing the ASX 200 now little change after a 3-day decline. So pretty much steady as she goes kind of day into those Christmas holidays. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Sophie. But moving on now, we have Boeing, which is named the new CEO after Dennis Muilenburg was sacked following a tumultuous year at the helm, and the plane maker is struggling to navigate the 737 MAX crisis and is now telling to hold part shipments for a month. Stephen Engel of Bloomberg News tells us how significant this development is at Boeing.
It is significant, obviously. I mean, under Dennis Muilenburg, Boeing had been on a great run. I mean, this company had become the biggest industrial giant in the United States, surpassing GE under Muilenburg. Its stock had tripled up until the beginning part of this year, when the problems, the mechanical problems started to surface, obviously, with the 737 MAX, the 2 crashes, and then more than 346 deaths associated with that. Then the cracks started to show. obviously. Dennis Muhlenberg, his philosophy, his mantra was compete to win. And he really drove a hard bargain with suppliers around the world. He put, according to a number of analysts, a laser focus on cash and costs. And the question now, after he's been sort of forced out, it's being called a retirement, but let's not mince words. He's pretty much been ousted. You know, the question now is, did he put cash and cost savings at the expense of safety? That is the big question. David Calhoun now has the big task. He's a former GE veteran. He is the former CEO, or is now the CEO and president, taking over for Muhlenberg.
So, yes, David Calhoun taking over in mid-January. What's the first order of business?
It's a long to-do list, isn't it? Well, first of all, of course, well, not first. You have to look at getting those airplanes back in the sky. I mean, I was in Renton recently in the last couple of months. You can see the tails of the 737 MAXs lined up there on the tarmac, probably as well up north at the Everett Painfield facility. More than 400 737 MAXs lining up. They were producing 42 of these a month until recently. They've decided to suspend production, obviously, because we do not have a time frame for getting the MAX certified by regulators. But there's also other engineering issues. There have been production problems with the KC-46 tanker. There have been delays to the 777X new jetliner. There's been this more recent embarrassing mishap with the new space capsule failing to rendezvous with the International Space Station. But these are probably secondary to repairing the relations with the regulator, the FAA. Because we just got a statement, in fact, just within hours of Boeing saying that Dennis Muhlenberg was going to step down, the FAA put out a sharp rebuke of Boeing and of the leadership there, saying that the new leadership must focus on being transparent in its relationship with the FAA as safety regulator. And this has been one of the biggest criticisms of Dennis Muhlenberg, as well as the Boeing leadership and its relationship the last few years with the FAA, that perhaps it had too much say, too much of a bully pulpit, if you will, in getting safety reviews through the regulator, and there's some resentment built up at the FAA. Now, is Calhoun the right man to do that job? He's affable, he's well-connected, but one guest we had on Bloomberg Television earlier this morning says maybe Calhoun, 62 years old and nearing the retirement age, is not necessarily the person to lead long-term.
Well, moving on, the JMM-Congress alliance managed to secure a majority in the 81-member Jharkhand Assembly on Monday. And this marks yet another electoral defeat for the BJP after a setback in Maharashtra. While critics are terming this as a referendum on the Citizenship Amendment Act, the BJP is quick to deny the same. And 10 Kate of Bloomberg News gets us more on this report.
Certainly a setback. You know, the BJP would have liked to have a victory here just to, you know, keep up momentum. Of course, when Modi came in 2014, the BJP started sweeping elections left and right. They peaked at running about 20 states along with their allies. With this loss, they're down to about 15. So, you know, with all of India's state elections, it's really a bellwether of where things might be going on the ground. Yet for Modi, it's still, you know, he's still just 3 or 4 months off from a huge win nationally, you know, a landslide win that many people thought he couldn't pull off. So he's still basking in that glow, so to speak. You know, the BJP is saying this is not a referendum on the citizenship bill. His opponents are saying it is, and he's got a lot to worry about. So where it goes from here, we'll have to see.
The government has tried really hard to ease these protests. They've really tried to prevent TV stations showing protests. They've banned and shut down internet access in some parts of New Delhi. Have all of these efforts worked at all?
Well, the protests are continuing for now. We saw the death toll rise over the weekend, particularly in Uttar Pradesh, where we've seen religious clashes. get very deadly in previous years. So the efforts so far, could they have been worse? It's really hard to say. They are definitely the biggest street action against Modi since he came to power in 2014. The opposition is trying to gain traction out of this. They're trying to keep it going. They're still holding rallies. Modi is seeking to contain the damage right now. He's already said, they're not going to push forward on a national citizenship registry, which would be the next sort of shoe to drop in these policies that are appealing to his hardline Hindu base. So, it's a bit of a combination right now of Modi trying to take action to kind of quash any protest and then ease up on the policies that are really driving the anger.
And now let's see what's making headlines across the globe. Paul Allen of Bloomberg News brings us the first word headlines.
Thousands rallied in Hong Kong on Monday evening against police action to seize money raised by a crowdfunding platform to support the anti-government protest movement. Police arrested 4 people over suspicions of money laundering and froze almost $9 million of assets from the Spark Alliance group on Thursday. Spark Alliance condemned the police action as defamatory. The unrest in Hong Kong has surfaced in talks between China and Japan and Beijing. Shinzo Abe raised the subject, telling Xi Jinping that he's very concerned and urged China to continue to exercise self-restraint. Abe also mentioned the treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, saying the international community is increasingly worried. Chinese state television said President Xi agreed that sensitive issues should be handled properly. 5 people have been sentenced to death in Saudi Arabia for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul last year. However, the Saudi court ruled the killing wasn't premeditated and said it didn't have enough evidence to incriminate 2 senior officials close to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He has repeatedly denied sanctioning the killing, but the US says it couldn't have happened without his knowledge. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Paul Allen. This is Bloomberg.
And now let's take a look at how the trade setup is for today. And well, I'm going to start off with the SGX Nifty as usual for now. And again, as usual, indicating a level, not too much in terms of movement. Absolutely flat, in fact. But let's talk about yesterday. And yesterday was also relatively flat, at least on the major indices. We didn't see too much movement on the small cap, the mid cap indices. Again, coming down to the banking indices, well, the PSU banking index was a tad weaker than the general markets. But what about ADRs and how are things panning out here? So we don't have too much going in for here either, considering we are looking at declines in ICICI Bank and HDFC Bank, but about 1.5%, no more than that. What about the other set of ADRs? Are we looking at a lot of traction there? No, none whatsoever. So from there, we move on to your fund flows. And just so happens that we are looking at a substantial, larger number as far as FIs are concerned. But we must remember that there were a handful of bulk deals out there, which has resulted into such large numbers. About 1,463 odd crores net figure buying coming in from FIs, and DI is selling stock worth 1,947 odd crores. So we'll be watching out for that. But again, as I'm, the indication is because of some large couple of bulk deals. But as far as the contribution is concerned, again, not too much to speak for here. Very evenly poised between HDFC Bank and HDFC Limited, as against Reliance Industries and ICICI Bank, along with SBI, providing that bit of pressure. Let's talk about futures and options. We are in expiry. Do remember, today is the penultimate day for this particular expiry, considering tomorrow is a trading holiday. Well, we do have rollovers picking up, and this number will be much higher today, I suspect, at around 33% for now for the Nifty banking futures rollovers currently standing at 36%. A little bit of a slowdown as compared to what we saw yesterday. But in terms of options, again, there's no surprise here. 12,200 put is what I'm keeping an eye on for now, along with the 12,000 put. And in terms of change in open interest, let's see where the change has come through, and there's been writing around the 12,300 mark. Again, on expected lines, but we don't have a whole lot of volumes coming through. At least as far as yesterday was concerned. But, in terms of the WIX, that came off even further. It's moved out below the mark of 12 for the first time since June or July that we've seen the WIX below 12. And in terms of the Nifty put call ratio, that's come down to around 1.66 against 1.72. And in terms of stocks, let's pull that up. We have Muthoot Finance, which is looking at fresh longs. A lot of accumulation in January open interest, as you can see here. Moving on, we also have the likes of RBL Bank, where we are actually looking at some short build-up, some weakness coming through. And again, we have about 10.5 million shares coming in January. Berger Paints is the other one which is doing reasonably well, along with the likes of other cash counters like AkzoNobel, and of course Coal India is the other one which is looking at a decline in open interest of, or rather decline in the spot, down by around 1.8%. So a handful of stocks out there to watch out for. And well, of course, we'll also be keeping an eye on the indices and to see whether or not that consolidation continues to come through. But on that note, let me get in Somit Sarkar, who joins us now for all the stocks in news. Somit, good morning. What is on your list today?
Good morning, Agam. I'll start off with Vodafone Idea and Bharti Infratel. Now, the long stop date for the merger completion of Indus Towers and Bharti Infratel ends today, that is December 24th. Now, the merger completion is yet to be announced as the company is awaiting the government approval pertaining to FDI enhancement. Now, if you remember, the long stop date for this merger was already extended by 60 days from October 24th to December 24th. NIT Tech, because the board has approved buyback of 19.6 lakh equity shares at 1725 rupees per share, aggregating to close to 337.5 crore rupees. Now, the company will be buying back nearly 3.1% of the equity using 20.2% of the net worth. Now, the promoter will also participate in this buyback according to the release. Hindalco, where the company is saying that Muri refinery in Jharkhand has restarted production of alumina, which was shut since April 10, 2019. Now, because of this, the company will not need to import alumina going forward. JSPL, because the Australian court has approved the proposed restructuring scheme of external debt for its Australian subsidiary. ICICI, because they have signed an MOU with Hotel and Restaurant Association of Northern India. The MOU was signed for listing the association members' hotel and their room rate inventories for sale on the ICICI portal. Along with this, ICICI has also revised tariff of standard meals on static units over Indian Railways. Sheraton Hotels, because they have entered into a franchisee agreement with Hyatt India Consultancy for Hyatt Regency Navi Mumbai. Now, the upcoming 260 key hotel will be the first Hyatt Regency branded hotel under Sheraton Hotels, and the project is expected to complete by 2022. Also, the company has signed a license agreement for 55 rooms in Darjeeling, which is expected to open in September 2022. Pidilite Industries, because their arm has decided to invest nearly 49 crore in Home Vista decor and furnishings. Great Eastern Shipping, because they have delivered the Suezmax crude carrier to its buyers, and the vessel was contracted for sale on November 19th. NR Agarwal Industries, because the company will be doing a viability study to set up 500 TPD duplex board unit 6 as part of its expansion plan. And lastly, Lux Industries, where the promoter has sold nearly 3.8% stake in the company, while the buyer was RBS for around 1.8% stake. Now, the promoter said that the sale was executed by the promoter group as part of the strategic divestment process, and this sale would advance the progress of proposed merger of two units with the company.
Thanks so much for that, Somit. But we'll move on to another, important development here with respect to Carvy. ICICI Bank knew that Carvy Stockbroking was using client shares as collateral for loans, and the private bank also sought additional cover from the promoters and the company since the market regulator had set a deadline for brokers to stop using client shares as a pledge for personal use. Aman Kapadia, who's gone through the loan agreement and the interim order passed by the Debt Recovery Tribunal order, joins us now for more. Aman, to be fair, ICICI Bank, they would not have known that clients had been informed that the shares were pledged. What are your findings?
That's right. ICICI Bank could not have ascertained whether the client had given the consent or not. But the bank did seek additional cover from the Parthasarathis and the company. But what becomes clear from the Debt Recovery Tribunal's interim order is that the personal cover is not enough for the entire loan amount. Remember, ICICI Bank is one of the 5 lenders which have moved recovery courts after NSDL returned shares to Carvy's clients following the SEBI order. Now, coming to the additional cover sought by the private lender, the loan documents show that the agreement between ICICI Bank and Carvy was inked on September 25. That's 5 days before the SEBI deadline ended. The market regulator had made it clear all pledge shares belonging to clients had to be returned to them, provided they had paid in full. The loan document also mentions the SEBI circular. The terms included cover of at least 2 times the amount. The 10 assets provided as collateral by C. Parthasarathy, the chairman and MD of Carvy Group, do not make up for the entire loan facility. The document also mentions that Carvy needed to provide registered power of attorney to operate the client's pledged share in favor of the bank. The Debt Recovery Tribunal had made it clear that Carvy and its promoters can't create any encumbrance or sell any of the assets provided as collateral to lenders.
Thanks for that, Aman. But from there, there's lots to talk about over the course of the day, and you will find all the live market action on BloombergQuint. But there are also a few stories that you should consider reading on our website, BloombergQuint.com. Here they are. Lenders to Jet Airways India have decided to seek fresh initial bids for the bankrupt airline, according to an exchange filing on Monday. And the grounded airline is undergoing insolvency proceedings at the National Company Law Tribunal, and its committee of creditors are seeking a buyer to recover dues. And to protect consumer interests, the Reserve Bank on Monday said that that on a peer-to-peer lending platform, that the permissible exposure of a lender to all borrowers should not exceed rupees 50 lakhs at any given point of time. And on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of All You Need to Know. Stay tuned to BloombergQuint for more news and updates.